This is a bit of entertainment. If you enjoy this production, please like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. Kindly watch the video to the end. Thanks for the view and enjoy the video. If you want to hear more of this storyline, please tell us in the comments. Deep in the heart of Louisiana, where the Spanish moss hangs heavy and the alligators rule the murky waters, there lies a secret whispered on the wind through the cypress trees, a secret that speaks of horror, of unspeakable acts, and of creatures that haunt the night. This is the story of the LBMC, the Louisiana Bayou Monster Corps. And it begins not with magic, but with the all-too-real horrors of war. The experiments, shrouded in secrecy, were the brainchild of Dr. Albright. Obsessed with power, he saw prisoners as lab rats. His goal to create the perfect soldier, immune to pain, fear, fatigue. Albright's methods were twisted. He subjected prisoners to horrific experiments, pushing them to the brink of death. Instead of soldiers, he created monsters. Their bodies changed, minds shattered. They no longer resembled men. The camp descended into chaos. The creatures, driven by a primal hunger, escaped into the surrounding swamps. They became known as the LBMC, the Louisiana Bayou Monster Corps, a grotesque parody of the soldiers they were meant to be. The swamps became a place of fear. Animals fled in terror from the shambling horrors. Forever changed by Albright's experiments, they were no ordinary monsters. They were something far worse. Animated by a dark energy that defied explanation, they craved living flesh, driven by an insatiable hunger, the embodiment of everything unholy and unnatural. The swamp zombies of Louisiana. The locals whispered tales of their gruesome deeds. Fishermen vanished, their nets filled with bones. Hunters went missing, their cries echoing through the trees. The LBMC consumed everything in their path, a plague upon the land, a living nightmare. And so the legend of the LBMC was born. A legend whispered around campfires, a warning to those who venture into the swamps at night. But the story does not end there. For every monster there is a hero. In the heart of Cajun country, a savior awaited. A savior who would become both guardian and jailer to the monstrous legacy of the LBMC. The bayou, once teeming with life, now echoed with a different kind of symphony. The guttural moans of the Louisiana Bayou Monster Corps filled the humid air. They moved through the tall reeds like grotesque wading birds, craving warm, living flesh. Nutria met gruesome ends, their bones crunched between decaying teeth. Water moccasins found themselves outmatched, their venom useless against the undead. The LBMC consumed it all, leaving behind only silence and decay. Their numbers grew, a testament to Dr. Albright's hubris. Bound by their shared hunger, they roamed the swamps, a chilling reminder of the horrors beneath the surface. Deep in the heart of the swamp, where the sun rarely penetrated the thick canopy of cypress trees, lived old Mossback, a massive alligator, his scales as thick and gnarled as the bark of the surrounding trees. He was the undisputed king of this domain, feared by man and beast alike. One night, as the moon cast an eerie glow, old Mossback felt a tremor in the water. Something sinister. LBMC emerged from the reeds, their glowing eyes fixed on him. The battle was swift and brutal. Old Mossback, despite his size and strength, was outnumbered. The king was dead. The LBMC feasted on his flesh. The town of Isle-de-Jean-Charles, nestled on the edge of the bayou, had always lived in a delicate balance with the swamp. But the arrival of the LBMC shattered that balance, unleashing a terror unlike anything they had ever known. Fishermen returned with tales of strange creatures, their nets torn. Hunters disappeared, their dogs found whimpering. Then came the disappearances. A young boy snatched away, teenagers silenced. Fear turned to panic. The LBMC, driven by insatiable hunger, advanced towards the town. Isle-de-Jean-Charles was now under siege. As the darkness tightened its grip on Isle-de-Jean-Charles and the moans of the approaching LBMC drew closer, a new story began to circulate among the terrified townsfolk. A story whispered in hushed tones, a glimmer of hope in the face of despair. It was the story of a woman, they said, a woman who lived deep in the heart of the bayou, a woman who possessed a power older than the swamps themselves, a witch. Some dismissed it as mere superstition, a desperate attempt to find comfort in the face of unimaginable horror. But others, those who remembered the old ways, the stories passed down through generations, clung to the hope that the whispers held truth. They spoke of a white witch, a guardian of the balance, a protector of the innocent, a woman who, if their prayers were answered, might be their only salvation. Little did they know, the White Witch was already aware of the horrors unfolding in her domain. She had felt the disturbance in the force, the unnatural energy of the LBMC spreading like a plague through the swamps, and she knew that she could no longer remain a passive observer. The LBMC, a threat to everything she held sacred, had to be stopped. The fate of Ile de Jean Charles, the fate of the bayou, rested on her shoulders. The White Witch, her heart heavy with the weight of responsibility, prepared to face the darkness. She gathered her strength, drawing upon the ancient power that flowed through her veins, the power of the bayou itself. The battle for the soul of the swamp was about to begin. Deep within the Louisiana bayou, where the sun dared not penetrate the thick canopy of Spanish moss and cypress trees, resided the White Witch. Her dwelling was a testament to the wild, untamed beauty of the swamp, vines entwined around the weathered cypress planks of her cabin. The air hung heavy with the scent of wisteria and decaying vegetation. Spanish moss dripped from the trees, swaying gently in the humid breeze. It was a place where the veil between the mortal world and the realm of spirits felt thin. The bayou, with all its capriciousness, is my domain, and I rule it with a firm yet compassionate hand. The White Witch, her name whispered in hushed tones, was a creature of this world, yet apart from it. The White Witch did not ride a broomstick or cackle over a bubbling cauldron. Her magic, subtle yet potent, was drawn from the earth itself. It was a magic born of respect, maintaining the delicate balance of nature. She had not sought out this power. It was a burden and a gift. Passed down through generations, intertwined with the bayou's roots. Her ancestors faced countless threats to protect the ecosystem, but the threat posed by the LBMC was unlike anything they had ever encountered, something born of man's arrogance, tampering with forces he did not understand. The White Witch stood on the porch of her cabin, her gaze fixed on the swirling vortex of dark energy that marked the epicenter of the LBMC's power. The air crackled with unnatural energy, the scent of decay thick and cloying. White Witch! Her fingers tightened around the amulet that hung from a leather cord around her neck. This amulet, passed down through generations of witches, was the key to containing the darkness, to restoring balance to the bayou. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the cypress trees, the Spanish moss swaying like phantoms in the gathering gloom. The air grew heavy, charged with anticipation. The battle for the soul of the bayou was about to begin, and the White Witch, her resolve hardened by centuries of responsibility, would face it head-on. The night throbbed with the dread-soaked anticipation of a storm. Above, the moon, a sliver of bone in a bruised sky, cast an eerie skeletal glow upon the bayou. Spanish moss, stirred by an unnatural wind, danced like phantoms, their movements a grotesque mockery of a waltz. White Witch, the White Witch, a beacon of emerald green amidst the encroaching darkness, stood at the edge of Ile de Jean Charles. Gone were the quaint charm and vibrant life that had once defined the small town. The houses, their wooden frames warped by time and the humid air, now stood as silent sentinels, their windows shuttered tight against the horrors that lurked just beyond the flickering gaslights. The LBMC, a tide of decaying flesh and vacant eyes, advanced relentlessly, their hunger a palpable entity, a suffocating wave of need and despair. But the White Witch, her gaze unwavering, her emerald robes billowing in the unnatural wind, stood firm. The amulet, clutched tightly in the White Witch's hand, pulsed with a warm, reassuring light. She closed her eyes, drawing upon the strength of generations of witches, their wisdom and resilience flowing through her veins like the lifeblood of the swamp itself. White Witch, with a voice that echoed the rustling of cypress leaves and the murmur of the bayou's murky water, she began to chant. The words, ancient and powerful, were not meant for human ears. The air crackled with energy, responding to her call, bending to her will. Vines, thick as pythons, snaked out from the darkness, their emerald tendrils reaching for the approaching LBMC. The very earth beneath their feet seemed to convulse, opening up in gaping maws of mud and mire, swallowing the undead whole. But the White Witch, drawing upon the ancient magic of the bayou, was a force of nature herself, a protector of the balance, and she would not be denied. As the heart of their power left them, the LBMC faltered. Their movements, once fluid and unnatural, became erratic, their moans laced with a new kind of anguish. The light faded from their eyes, replaced by a chilling emptiness. They stumbled, their bodies collapsing in on themselves, returning to the dust from which they should never have been disturbed. White Witch! The White Witch, her hand still throbbing from the ordeal, watched as the darkness receded, the unnatural energy dissipating into the swamp. The air, once thick with the stench of decay, cleared, replaced by the familiar aroma of damp earth and vegetation. The swamp, though wounded, was beginning to heal. The town, bathed in the soft glow of the returning moon, could breathe again. The swamp, no longer a battleground, lay eerily still. A silence deeper than the usual nocturnal hush had descended, as if nature itself were catching its breath after a terrible exertion. The air, cleansed of the cloying stench of decay, carried the scent of rain, a promise of renewal. White Witch! The orb of darkness, still pulsating faintly in her hand, throbbed like a monstrous, corrupted heart. She could feel its insidious energy trying to worm its way into her thoughts, whispering promises of power, tempting her with the seductive allure of control. But the White Witch, her spirit tempered by generations of wisdom and sacrifice, resisted its pull. Her hand, now trembling with the effort of containing the orb's dark energy, instinctively moved towards the amulet at her neck. It was time to bind the darkness, to imprison it once more within an object that could contain its malevolent power. She selected a fallen cypress branch, its wood already weathered and gnarled, and with a few precise movements of her bone-handled knife she began to shape it. White Witch! As she worked, she whispered words of power, ancient incantations passed down through her lineage, each syllable imbued with the strength and resilience of the bayou itself. The air shimmered around her, responding to her will, bending to the ancient magic she commanded. The orb of darkness, sensing her purpose, throbbed violently in her grasp. White Witch! Slowly, painstakingly, she coaxed the dark energy from the orb, weaving it into the cypress wood, binding it with her will and the ancient magic of the bayou. The wood smoked and hissed as it absorbed the darkness, the air thick with the scent of burnt ozone and a strange metallic tang. The amulet, now pulsing with a faint internal light, felt warm to the touch, a reassuring weight against her skin. The bayou, slowly recovering from the ordeal, breathed a sigh of relief. The air, no longer crackling with unnatural energy, held the sweet scent of honeysuckle and the earthy aroma of damp soil. Life, resilient as ever, began to reclaim the spaces where darkness had held sway. High atop a withered cypress tree, its branches skeletal against the star-dusted sky, a murder of crows gathered. Their eyes, black and glittering like obsidian, followed the White Witch's every move as she made her way back towards her secluded cabin. These were not ordinary birds, their presence a mere coincidence. They were harbingers, messengers of a different kind of power, drawn to the residual energy of the amulet and the whispers of envy that clung to it like Spanish moss. Among them, perched on a branch that creaked ominously in the still night air, sat a crow larger than the others, its feathers as dark as midnight. Deep within the heart of the bayou, in a place where the sun never shone and the very air felt heavy with malice, the Black Witch stirred. Unlike her counterpart, whose magic was rooted in the life-giving force of the swamp, the Black Witch drew her power from the shadows, from the decay and death that were as much a part of the bayou as life itself. Her lair, shrouded in perpetual twilight, was a stark contrast to the White Witch's rustic cabin. Twisted roots, resembling skeletal fingers, reached out from the mud, their grip strong enough to crush bone. Strange fungi, their caps glowing with an eerie phosphorescence, illuminated the space with an unsettling light. The Black Witch, her features obscured by the shadows that clung to her like a second skin, listened intently as the large crow, its feathers ruffled from its journey, perched on her outstretched hand. Its voice, raspy and low, filled the silence with tales of the White Witch's ordeal, of the power she had faced, of the toll it had taken on her. A slow, predatory smile spread across the Black Witch's lips, her teeth, white as bone, gleaming in the dim light. The swamp bore the scars of battle like badges of honor. Twisted cypress trees stood as reminders of the LBMC's rampage. The air, though cleansed by the White Witch's magic, still held a faint echo of decay. Life had returned to the bayou. Birdsong now filled the air with hope and renewal, but beneath the surface a current of unease still flowed. The cycle of light and darkness, of creation and destruction, was never ending. The bayou existed in a state of perpetual flux, a delicate balance maintained by forces both seen and unseen. As its guardian, she upheld that balance, standing against the shadows. The Black Witch, thwarted and enraged, retreated to the darkest corners of the swamp. Her crows, spies and messengers watched with malevolent intent. The bayou held its breath, caught between light and darkness. The cycle continued, a testament to the enduring power of nature and the eternal struggle for balance. Bart's Bits has been proud to bring you this production for entertainment purposes. If you have enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel, like the video and ring the bell. Please let us know what you liked in the comments. Your taking the time to help us is very much appreciated. Hope to see you again soon.